What had you want to learn orgasmic meditation?
I I as early as I can remember thought about a lot of erotic things and they confused me. I could feel people when they were turned on and I thought that was weird and that it made me bad or wrong. I had pretty strict uh, messaging from my parents around my sexuality, and so it just compounded on itself until I felt very, very far away from my own erotic nature and get in these long relationships and they would have very little sex in them. Just be so frustrated because it was something I thought about so much and I felt so much and I just didn't have any tools or any. It's not that I didn't have people to talk about it to. I was afraid to talk about it. I was afraid to be seen in it, and and the people at OneTaste were so palpable. Like the freedom that they had around the erotic was just, it was clear. There was no denying it. You know, to be around them was to feel some of that freedom for myself. It was just instant, you know? And so it felt it felt like it just felt so obvious to me. You know what you're talking about? How you were kind of not paying attention to the conversation in the room because this thing just was growing and growing in your mind. That's exactly what was my experience. Was there's nothing more clear, and I'm such a people pleaser. Like a lot of people are, but I am and was a huge people pleaser. So if people didn't like something, I would not do it. You know, it wasn't like, oh, I want to do this. I don't care that my friends are a no, or I want to do this. If my parents, when my parents said don't do that, I wouldn't do that. You know, like it was just that kind of
Mm.
setup for me. And even in the face of my partner's comment at the time, and in the face of my friends, the fear I had that no one would approve, I still was a yes. You know, there was something pulling me through that was way more powerful than the people pleaser behavior that I was,
Mm.
uh, you know.
Slowly the
Uh,
desire got bigger.
mm. And I think that I wanted to be myself. I wanted to feel like my insides were on my outsides and that I was okay with that. And a big, huge part of my insides was all this erotic energy. And so it took a lot of energy to hide that for so long and to feel so much shame about it. And yeah, this was like my lifeline
Mm.
to becoming myself inside out.
I love that.
Yeah, it was great.
That feels
Mm,
really good.
mm,
Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting to hear because I've known you for so long, but to hear your like the feeling of like your journey of being drawn into, or like it's like being drawn into or drawing in, you know,
mhm.
it's kind of like the same
Am
thing.
I being called or am I calling
Yeah.
it? Yeah.
Who's calling me? Like what am I calling you or are you calling me? And yeah, I had a very similar experience with that. And I was actually married at the time when I found out about it, and had kind of like in my mind this like track of life, but always was like kind of like looking over here to the left, being like, is this really the path? Like, do I want to like continue down this path that, and it's not like anyone was like forcing me really, like no one had a gun to my head, but it was like that was that was where I was going. Um and it was like when I first heard about, well, when I first walked into the space of OneTaste, that was when I was really like, okay, like now I can like track back to a year and a half, like something is calming me. I think it was the first time that I could admit like, oh, there's something here, that
Mm,
something deeper and more powerful than my rational mind is calling in. And it was like, for me, the process of those 8 months from when I first walked into the center to when I actually walked into my first course, and said, yes, I would like to learn this practice, even though it is deeply confronting to my mind. I felt like there was this complete unraveling of that like path that I had started to carve out. Like I didn't really like do too much, it's not like I like had like a whole career and family. It wasn't like that much carved out, but it was like that was the kind of way that I was going. And I felt like it was like an unraveling of like, how could I go down that path when I don't really know who I am? Like, um, will adding things on top of my life get me to where I want to go?
Mm.
And it felt like to me the process of and I don't know that I could have articulated this at the time, but looking back, like it was like the saying yes to oming was like saying yes to living a life from the inside out, and like really saying like I'm not going to put anything on top of me and on top of my desire as a woman.
Yeah.
And I really want my power and my desire to lead my life first.